So we are past the 1 minute mark. So allow me to kindly begin in the interest of time. My name is Lilian Halaimula. I serve as the Climate Advocacy Coordinator at DanChurchAid, and I will be your main facilitator for this financing resilience session. If you listened to my session earlier during the plenary session in the morning, then you understand that I underscored that there's no topic that's hotter than finance now as we approach COP30. But this session will not be the session where we unpack the technicalities of finance and the conversation of making money bigger or unpacking the quantity of adaptation finance, but we will be focusing on how to make adaptation finance better. So looking at its quality rather than quantity alone. And helping me to do this will be brilliant colleagues drawn from all over the world. We will have Leah from Kenya, we will have Omaira from Latin America, and we will also have Prakash from Nepal. And to start this conversation off, I'd like Matthias to kindly share a video to get us started. Please listen keenly because there'll be something at the end of it all. Matthias, kindly. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Matthias. I would just paste a link so that you guys can tell me what you are able to get from that very brief conversation so that we start our discussions. So kindly let me know what you think based off the video you just watched. I'll also share my screen so that we can see the conversations that are coming, but keep engaging with the link, please kindly. Yeah, I see some of the responses coming up. Please let me know if you can see my screen. I'm seeing frustration, bureaucracy, fragmented finance, timely support agency. Yes. Inaccessibility, paperwork limitation, difficulty to access funds, top-down approach is being used. Yes. Gearing fundings to needs. Yes, the needs of the communities. Red tape, I'd really love to know what that means. Excessive paperwork. Interesting. So I'll just stop, but thank you for engaging with that link. And all of you, whatever you've shared are the sentiments that we could easily pick from this conversation. But this is just a mock conversation. It could be true, maybe it could be an exaggerations. And these people are sharing based off their experiences, with adaptation finance. But what this session wants you to understand is that we don't want to unpack the quality of adaptation finance in one box. We understand that adaptation finance comes in various natures, and it's implemented in various natures or forms as well. So we have subdivided adaptation finance into 3 models for this session. We have the decentralized climate finance, which Leah will be tackling. And then we have the intermediated climate finance, which Omaira will be tackling. Then we have the direct community finance, which Prakash will be tackling, because we want to understand how the quality of finance look from those angles so that we can understand what's working. Is it the funds that are being managed by the subnational governments, which is the decentralized climate financing? Or is it the finance that are being handled by, the international non-governmental organizations, which is the intermediated climate finance? Or is the direct climate financing for communities really working? Can any community member run to whichever donor and be able to access that finance? So we will unpack it in that breadth. And to start us off, I'd love to invite Leah. Leah, kindly tell us your experience with the decentralized financing. How do funds usually move from local government to the people? And how does this affect how quickly and easily communities get support and make decisions to help them adapt sustainably with the rising climate crisis? Leah.
So thank you, Lillian, and participants. I'm going to speak to a project or a fund here in Kenya, referred to as Financing Locally Led Climate Action, which is a fund by the World Bank to the government of Kenya, which further disperses that fund to the subnational governments, which we call the county governments here in Kenya for climate finance. The fund is majorly focused on sectors that are mostly affected by climate change, and it is a matching fund. So if the subnational governments perform very well or are able to utilize the money and utilize it well, then the fund might increase or decrease. So basically, that flow of funds from the national government or from the World Bank to the national government, then to the county government, has made climate projects a bit more efficient. From our experience at NCCK, we see there is agency, community agency is considered. And in this case, we are talking about community members being able to prioritize the kind of projects they would want for the government to invest their money into. Sometimes there are innovative solutions, sometimes there are things around what they need as individuals, but some other times it's communal. So like restoration of a wet spring or a river, and sometimes it's basic like supply of seedlings or even seeds that are helpful to the community in terms of food security. I think the other thing I have seen the subnational financing model working is that the laws and the regulations and even policies can be an enabler. So then for the subnational funding mechanisms to work very well, there should be laws, legislations, or even policies that allow communities or local people to participate in prioritizing, in setting apart funds for climate adaptation, but also some of the needs that they might have within the community. So policies and laws being there. For the case of Kenya, we have had a Climate Change Act, which has been an enabler, which is at national level, but even at the county levels, which are the subnational governments, which have these laws that have established a climate change fund. So then not only the Treasury or the national governments can put climate adaptation finance, but even other organizations or even other funding groups can put in some money for localized climate action. I think finally, seeing that the projects or the subnational funds are at local level, there's a certain sense of accountability or governance that improves because now the decisions are made by local people, and so they are easily able to keep their leaders or the duty bearers who are there at the local level implementing the project accountable. Therefore, by using that method or by having some form of decentralized climate adaptation finance, there is improved governance, but also accountability of the funds. Finally, our experience is that community members or local groups have knowledge that we might not always, read in the books or have it present in every document. So this indigenous knowledge is really used if we use the decentralized funding. Perhaps it's not all of it, but community members get to contribute, get to share what was there before and what is there now, and how we used to do things, and come up with ways that we can either innovate or even adapt in a better manner, as opposed to having solutions being, brought, or external solutions being recommended or utilized or even implemented, as opposed to the local indigenous knowledges and also proposals that are done at community level. That being the case, I think the decentralized form of adaptation finance is very relevant. It helps climate action to be more, to have community voices, or to have people participating, to have people contributing, and the needs of the people are met in a faster manner, as opposed to what we have just watched, where there is a lot of red tape, there's a lot of late disbursements. I think that if we can all decentralize, maybe even further, not only one form of government, but even directly to the community members, climate adaptation finance will be much more effective and efficient. So thank you, and back to you, Lillian.
Thanks, Leah. You can just tell us where you're from as well, the organization.
Okay. All right, my name is Leah Modoni Kimotho. I work for the National Council of Churches of Kenya, who are partnering with the DanChurchAid to do an accountability, a project on accountability for the FLOCA project, which is the World Bank funded project on financing locally led adaptation. So thank you.
Thank you, Leah. And from what you said, it feels like it's all rosy. Are there no issues with your model in 1 minute?
It's not all rosy. It's not all rosy. I think one of the biggest challenge is in relation to community participation. Sometimes the community voices are not really considered, or there is ineffective gathering of community participation, and therefore some projects might be prioritized that are not, the best priority because of power, and sometimes our leaders or the duty bearers have other priorities that might not be relevant or even timely to the community members at that time. I think the other thing is, as usual, for any participation of the community, there's a possibility or a risk of apathy, that sometimes we prioritize this project, but because we don't have all the power, our duty bearers pick another project of interest, and therefore we get apathetic and not participate in future decision-making processes or prioritization processes. So thank you.
Thanks, Leah. I'm also just looking at time just to let our participants know that these conversations will be furthered in the breakout rooms. We will have the breakout rooms immediately after this foundational session that we are doing. But kindly allow me to move to Omaira. Omaira, you can come on board, introduce yourself, tell us where you work, who you are, and tell us how well intermediated financing models bridge the gap between international climate funds and the local communities, and also unpack some of the opportunities and challenges that exist in this model of finance.
Thank you, Lillian, and thank you for the invitation. And Omaira Bolaños from the Rights and Resources Initiative, and RRI is a global coalition of right holders organizations that works for securing collective tenure rights and access to finances. I'm the director of the Gender Justice Program. So I'm going to share some information and some notes related to the questions, and I'm going to read most of them because there are a lot of data. But just to say that in the current context, we are, next week is the COP30 in Brazil, and that represents a great new opportunity for donors to recommit and renew the commitment and momentum that was created before in terms of achieving the targets on biodiversity and climate action. But effective and rightful finances is crucial to close the gap in funding for securing the rights of indigenous, Afro-descendant, and local communities. Since the donor pledge that was made in the COP26 in 2021, there has been an increase in support for indigenous and local communities, but that progress has been fragile and increasingly threatened by the cuts in international aid. The report, State of Funding for Tenure Rights, showed that funding pathways has evolved and expanded in size, laying the ground for potentially more direct funding to communities working at the ground level. However, despite this increase, communities are receiving the share of the communities receiving on the ground remains below 1%. This related to a small share of climate-related philanthropy and official development assistance. The major increase in funding comes particularly among the forest tenure funders group donors, who reported $1.4 billion expenditures between 21 and 24. So money that has gone to communities from different sizes. However, the necessary changes to ensure that funds go directly to communities is still in progress. The funding is still low, and funding through international organizations and multilateral institutions remain the major source. On the other hand, this still remains very unclear to what extent women within indigenous, Afro-descendant, and local communities has directly benefited from the increasing funding flows. A lack of gender desegregated data in donor reporting makes it difficult to understand if funding that goes to the community through different channels is also benefiting women. And several women's organizations have made the call to donors to address the gender gap in funding, because women direct access to funding has been severely limited over the past years and decades. A recent report that we have with between RRI and the Women in Global South Alliance, WICSA, and WICSA is a network of 26 grassroots women's organizations from Africa, Asia, Latin America that spans work in 60 countries. We did an analysis with them about how has been their experience in accessing international funding for climate change and conservation. And what they found is the current global funding architecture primarily funds projects rather than addressing systemic changes that are needed to achieve climate and gender justice. Rigid short-term grants, heavy applications, and multiple reporting requirements and donor priorities that favor numbers over systemic changes is the norm. 80% of the WICSA members receive grants only of 2 or less years. And 25% reported having agreements on only 6 months or less. It's very tiny timeline for supporting. The median annual budget for the network for the women's organizations is just $338,000, while the median budget needed, according to the network, to maintain an organization working in climate change and conservation should be above 700,000. So they have more or less a gap of 50% of funding to function properly. On the other hand, Afro-descendant women's organizations from the Latin America and the Caribbean face a double injustice. Their funding normally is half of the size of the grants that indigenous women or local community women receive. And there are no funding dedicated to address both racial injustice and climate injustice. Women organizations must rely heavily on volunteer work to develop their activities, which add to the existing inequality of unpaid work that women normally perform. Core, flexible, and support funding, flexible funding is scarce. More than half of the WICSA organizations reporting having none or less than 10% of their budgets as core funding, which leave little room for the long-term hiring, staff retaining, and investment in organizational growth. The transition toward institutional core funding is essential in genuine empowerment and long-term transformative impact. Half of the organizations identify international organizations or their global networks as their principal source of funding, followed by private institutions. Only a handful cited feminist funds or UN agencies, and almost none reported significant support from the governments. There are opportunities anyway. The report also highlights the resilient, broad reach, and proven capacity of women organizations to deliver, even more when they are provided with trust-based institutional funding. Looking forward, we encourage donors to reconfigure their funding architectures to prioritize multi-year, flexible, and con support. This is crucial for developing climate and conservation targets that require long-term funding. Co-designing funding based on priorities and needs for women's organizations, shifting from donor control to donor grantee partnership is essential. And establishing dedicated funding lines for women's organizations is important. And lastly, in the last few years, there have been an establishment of new community-led funding mechanisms that require ongoing support. The Shandian mechanism, Clarify, Ereto Solidarity Fund, among others, are important. So there is an opportunity to move forward an equal partnership that is rooted in respect, mutual trust, where solutions are co-created, and just distribution of benefits. And finally, donors should acknowledge women as equal right holders in climate change.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think some interesting figures over there, but I think one of the things that must have caught the eye of everyone is the fact that you mentioned that for the intermediated, it's more of funding projects and not people. Yet we are talking about adaptation finance, and that is what they come as, adaptation finance. Yet they're focusing on projects and not people. A little bit of similarity there on them serving donor priorities. And from there, we had that, yeah, there's also that challenge of the decentralized climate finance serving the government's priorities. So in both cases, we are seeing a situation where local priorities are not being put at the forefront. But allow me to welcome Prakash. Prakash, please take us through. You've been working with communities. You've been there at the forefront. Please tell us, do you think the priorities of the communities are being factored in? And maybe you can start us off by telling us an example of when a community was able to, access funds directly and what the process looked like in that particular case. Thanks.
Thank you, Lillian. To introduce myself, my name is Prakash Lama. I'm from Nepal, and I'm currently engaged in Clean Energy Nepal as a program coordinator. Clean Energy Nepal mainly focused on three areas. One is climate change, another is urban, and then another is air pollution. So we mainly focused on research-based advocacy, police advocacy, and also we work closely with different, other organizations to do the research in the community and then do the police advocacy at the same time. Again, thank you, Lillian, for giving me this opportunity to share like how actually the communities are being able to like access the finance. But before that, I would like to highlight few things because it's much needed, and I think it's the problem of everyone. So whenever the funds comes to the country, so there is always one designated authority, and that is, I think, a Minister of Finance, of course. So whenever the budget comes, so it goes through the process in the government itself. So which again takes a bit more longer time due to its procedure, and then again it will take a little bit time to go to the community, which is again top down approach, which is very needs to be considered, and this needs to be also considered by the government itself in the future, that to make the accessible climate finance to the community. Um, in context of Nepal, I would like to highlight few things. First, if we go through our policies, we have very good policies at the national level as well as local levels. Like we have NAPS, and then we have also the LAPA, Local Adaptation Plan and Action, which is which is more focused on the local government and the communities. So that is the only way that that has been the only way that local government is working to make their own policies at their local level, to how they can make the the whole this climate finance accessible to communities from whole this top-down approach. So but still it is lacking, because like all the local government and the local government doesn't have that much capacity itself to be able to make those policies as of now. Like among 753 local governments in Nepal, only like 200, around 200 were able to make the this local adaptation plan and actions, and some of the city like Dhulikhel municipality are already working very good to like connect with the to the different entities that provides finance that will support the local government itself, and that will directly goes to the local communities, like improving their livelihoods, accessing the energy, improving their health issues, something like that. um, so and also that like the in I think like every year, like there is a annual budget plan, and then like there will be a certain finance is separated for climate, and under that adaptation comes. So in Nepal, like we have only 6% in the past 6% of budget is only allocated for the climate finance in the past, but this time they intended to increase up to 20%. How 20%. However, the for the disaster relief, they have like the quick reliefs, they have like 5% allocated. However, only like only around maybe 20% of this, among the 6% of the climate finance, only the 20% of the finance were able to be like accessed by the LGs and then communities. So it's again a harsh reality for us to be remembered. Um, so yeah, I already mentioned that budget planning already remains limited. At the same time, I would like to give few examples that were able to access the finance from the different entities, including government, with this plan that providing incentivize and then subsidized like program for the local communities, like uh, there are like few irrigation projects that has made the huge transition for the community, I mean, which is a game changer for the local farming community, that has benefited like hectares of lands, improving crop yields, increasing food security by ensuring stable water supply, and reduce to reduce vulnerability to floods and water shortages, as the new that that project has implemented, and also like addressed many drainage issues. At the same time, like people are also adapting like I also visited few very local communities that has the great issues of like most of the maybe I heard that I I heard from the local peoples that more than 60% of the peoples are already migrated from that area to the cities, and then other areas due to lack of like services like food availability, water shortages, and many issues. But with the support of the like this subsidized and incentivized program in collaboration with the government, and then this NGOs, like they were able to uh, make some projects like like small uh, small adaptation projects, uh, small adaptation projects like drip irrigation project, like solar lifting, that has been supporting their livelihoods, getting access to the clean drinking water, as well as supporting their irrigation and like whole farming areas always, as well as agriculture as well. So I would also like to give one example of the Bangladesh itself. Bangladesh, again,
Sorry,
it's a
sorry, Prakash, as you conclude, because we need to go to the breakout rooms. So in strictly 1 minute, because the breakout rooms will open in 2 minutes. So kindly.
Sure, sure. In case of other nation, like I have also get to know this from the different research that in the name of the client finance, people, the government are building the infrastructures rather than supporting the livelihood of the communities. So that is the one case. So in concluding to all of these, we still needs to work more on the ground to be able to make the access to the climate finance to the community, because the whole top-down approach is very, very a long procedure, and it needs to follow a lot of policies of the government itself, as well as the policies of the donors, as well as the entity. And at the same time, um, to be able to receive the funding, there are only few accredited organizations that are able to receive the funding from the international um, funding agencies. So at the same time, we also needs to work on that to make accessible to the climate finance easily for both at the national level and then as well as local level. Thank you.
Thank you. I think in a nutshell, I'm not going to belabor. In a nutshell, we are all saying that the community access is still a challenge, and capacity. There's also an issue of capacity in terms of how they can be able to even know when these funds are there and how to apply for them, though mainly they seem to be relying more on the decentralized climate financing for them to access these funds. But we've also had their issues with the decentralized climate financing, because they are more they're focused on the priorities of the government and not on the people. So in a nutshell, we will move into breakout rooms. I think so far, if Leah, you can hear me, maybe you can just in a nutshell try to again recap the issues that are coming out with the decentralized climate financing, just in a nutshell.
Thank you, Lillian. I think one of the key problems of one of the key issue of the decentralized finance is that community voices are not captured in the decision making by the government. And so by design or also by omission, there is then ineffective public participation, like for Kenya here, where we have laws and requirements that public participates in, or communities participate in prioritizing their projects, or even making the budgets for the county, but also national governments. You find that the community voice is lost And so then there is ineffective participation, which then would mean then that the prioritization of projects is also not adhering, or the initiatives by government on adaptation are not, do not contain community voices or even priorities and needs. I think the other thing is on the capacity gaps. We're expecting.
Sorry, Leah, because I'm also looking at time, but so far I
Mhm.
think you've made it very clear that the primary issue is community voices being left out because they're not involved in, decision making, and the design of this project, more or less. And based off of that, and I know, of course, there's also the issue of capacity, but let's stick with the community voices and their lack of participation, because that's like at the core. So using the link that I'm about to put, and bearing in mind that the issue we are working with here is that the community voices are not being included in decision-making processes, yet this money is supposed to serve them. What needs to be our message as we move to COP30? So just using that link that I have shared, please interact with this link. And Leah, you can now continue. I just wanted people to get the first main issue, which is on participation and community voices lagging behind. So maybe you can just continue identifying the issues with decentralized climate finance, then people can advise on the message.
Okay. I think the other thing is on priorities, the competing priorities of government and also the community. As I said earlier, the community will prioritize a project that is relevant, or an individual prioritize a project that is relevant to them, or an initiative that is relevant to them, but sometimes they also prioritize community projects. But then here we have government who are elected or given mandates based on projects or initiatives that they promise the bigger community. And so then there's that competing priority of duty bearers wanting to implement projects that are not necessarily the priority of the community. Why? Because the duty bearers, the political leaders or the elected leaders, the executive, want to leave a legacy, but also want to meet a certain promise they had made using this finance, that is adaptation finance, that is supposed to benefit the community. So basically that is one other issue, community or competing priorities between government and also the community. And government, in this case, I'm speaking to the sub-national governments, but it also features at national level, where even the national government will be implementing a project. Like, for instance, in Kenya last year, a lot of money was put into planting trees, for instance, that even the community or the Kenyans themselves felt that that big amount of monies did not need to be used for, just facilitating the cabinet secretaries to hop on a helicopter to plant trees. So those two, I think, are two key challenges that we are foreseeing. I think if you allow me, I'll speak to the last one.
Yes, but
which
also
is
just to call for people to interact. Please interact and let us know the message you want us to include. But Leah, proceed. But people continue interacting with the link.
I think the last one is really a very soft matter, where we have laws. I think we've also heard from the case of Nepal, where there is laws, there's legislations, there's policies that are guiding the processes that we undertake. But then these laws are being used in such a manner that the status quo remains. So whereas the law is made that we are supposed to participate, there is no clear what is participation. Does it mean that if if 20 of us attended a forum by government and we signed our name, that is participation.
We can hear you, but we have 1 minute. But I just wanted to read the advocacy message based on the things you're seeing. I think for us, then the advocacy message we want to have is that we urge national governments, financial institutions, and negotiators at COP30 to give local communities real power to plan, prioritize, and manage climate projects, ensuring that climate action is effective, equitable, and meets the needs of the local communities. Give me a thumbs up. I can also see a national government needs to work with local governments. Okay, good.
Yes, that is the case, Lillian. But also another thing, not only government to go local. We also need the other funding organizations also, the international, the multilateral, or even other funding institutions to consider going local, not only government. So that then we are talking about even institutions that are supplementing government work, also going local and considering the local voices and the needs of the people. Thank you very much, Lillian.
Thank you so much. I think we'll allow the others to come back into the room. I know the time has been very limiting for this conversation, but I want to believe that we have been able to at least craft a message, and therefore I'll allow Alma to just read the message that is coming from every room, one of the message. I know that you guys have interacted with the link on the Padlet, so we will continue refining these messages, but Alma, you can just read out what we have as at now.
Yes, thank you, Lillian. I hope you can all hear me. So yeah, the messages are decentralized climate finance, empower communities and local governments with direct access and technical support to ensure funds are used efficiently, swiftly, and for locally effective climate action. Another one of the key messages is that we urge national governments, climate finance institutions, UNFCCC negotiators, and development partners at COP30 to give local communities real power to plan, prioritize, and manage climate projects, ensuring climate action is effective, equitable, and meets local needs. And in the other breakout room where I was also part of, we also want to call for donors to renew momentum through a new pledge for funding for Indigenous people and local communities at COP30, and to reconfigure funding architectures to prioritize multi-year flexible support, devolving decision-making to the community level, ensuring also women's direct and fair access to funding. And if I may add also from our group, there was also a lot of talk about access to information, awareness of available funds at the local level, and ensuring that we bring the voices of and perspectives of women in decision making. Yes, I think, yeah, you can still use the Padlets to add more information, right?
Exactly, and I see them coming. There's one that has just come in, climate finance not as loans, even as they are coming through the different models, whichever form they are coming in, that they should not come in form of loans. I think we will try and consolidate because they're a bit similar to each other. We will try and ensure that we have strong messages. Yes, climate finance not to be left on the goodwill of governments. I think that's a good one as well.
Yeah, I think it's a comment from Sovia that the Padlet interaction was time bound. So yeah, I think it was.
I think I'll just drop I think Matthias, please drop your Padlet link. Just to indicate that was for room 3 on direct community financing, and drop the link. And then Alma, you can equally drop your link there so that people continue giving us their messages through the Padlets. Yeah. So feel free to interact. And just to conclude is to mention that, of course, your names are not coming out in the Padlet, so we don't know who is saying what. So we'll just take the message, and the idea is that these messages on 15th of November in Belém at COP30. We will be having a development and climate days session with key stakeholders in the negotiation and financing rooms, and we will be able to forward these voices that are coming from you, and hopefully they can influence some of the processes at COP30 this year. So thank you so much for being here, and yeah, let's continue interacting with the Padlets, and I wish you a lovely day, a lovely night to those who are already in the late hours. Yeah, thank you.